Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Dad at Arms podcast. I am your host, Dad at Arms. I also go by Colt. And with me today is my good friend, Jukka. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's been fun to watch your interviews with other people so far, and hopefully you just grow from here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, taking time out of your schedule to join me today. Uh, to start, why don't you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and tell people what it is that you do in relation to Masters of the Universe.
So, my name is Jukka Issakainen. I hail from Finland. I've been a fan of He-Man and She-Ra ever since I was a kid, and in recent times been very, very fortunate also to work on the brand in official capacity with some books and board games recently for the Archon studio, and they actually have some new things coming out in the pipeline. I can't say much of them. I hope you guys will enjoy them.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you've worked in an official capacity for the Masters of the Universe brand. I think in a general sense, what people would most recognize your work from is your work on some of the Dark Horse materials, the reference materials.
I think most have in their collections the wonderful mini comic collection book, or if they have gotten the character guide and world compendium, then they'll see my writings in there, and also the supplemental to the character guide.
And those are great sources of information. In fact, I just completed a fun Valentine's Day special video that will be on the channel, and I used a lot of the reference materials from both of those books, from the mini comics and from the character guide and world compendium. So if anybody out there, doesn't have access to those yet, I would highly recommend, picking those materials up because they're fantastic. And anything you'd want to learn about the characters of Masters of the Universe, the world, the locations, the artifacts, even, it's all in there, and it's a wealth of knowledge. So I think they're great books. So thanks for your work on those.
It's they are, and basically the work speaks for itself. I mean, I remember seeing toy brands like Transformers or even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that like they would have all these wonderful books that catalog either like the toys or have some character guides per se, and just it always felt like, well, where's the He-Man ones? And
Yeah.
it took a bit of time, but I mean, we even like passed already the 30th anniversary in and only like after we've gotten like the official books. So I mean, it's wonderful that they are out there, and you can still, I mean, get them on the online versions or even hard copies. So definitely recommend getting those on your bookshelves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to the work you've done with Dark Horse, you did a little bit of work with MV Creations on the 2000 comic series in some capacity. Is that right?
And not the main comics themselves. It came like after they had already ended their course, and the MV Creations people were helping on the DVD releases for BCI that put out all those wonderful like Filmation, He-Man and She-Ra DVDs and New Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to the 2002 series, and with it they had the idea that because there was this one script that got written, but it was never put into actual production. There's like no animation made for it, but they decided that, well, what if we make a comic adaptation and actually make it into a mini comic of sorts, so it will fit better as a store exclusive, a DVD case. So they had the comic people do the mini comic, and I was very fortunate there to have been online on the He-Man.org forums and just making my own fan art and trying to better myself with digital coloring. And I guess it was enough that I got noticed and was asked that if I could help out with some background colors. And all thanks to Val Staples, who was always looking out for fans to include in these projects. So that was in one way the first official place that I got to be involved with the He-Man brand. So it was fun, and at the time we even joked that maybe this will be like the best that will make at the time. They, like 2002 toys had already ended. They had these NECA sections, and those were also kind of winding down. So the DVD seemed to be that, okay, this is something that will come out, and maybe it'll be the end of it. But well, more projects came in the end, so it wasn't the thing.
That's awesome. While we're on this topic of the coloring that you've done, you also did a little bit of work with the newest the Blu-ray release for the Filmation series. Is that right?
In a roundabout way, I was involved with the fan animation projects that James Eatock did. His animation in the Filmation style, The Return of Faker, and he asked if I would help with coloring some of the like frame by frame animation for that, because I had worked with James already doing some pin-ups in his serial years earlier.
Okay.
And well, he that I'm a big fan of Filmation, and he invited me to help out there, and that fan animation is included as an Easter egg on the recent German released Filmation Blu-ray. It's a fun little addition. Any fans who have the set and may find it, it's not hit well, but you may need to do some digging around.
Oh, that's fun. You also did. You're also the author of an unofficial series guide for the 2002 series that you put together and self-published. What was that experience and the process of doing all of that? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Obviously, I was a big fan of the 2002 cartoon when it came out. It came at a very opportunistic time that I had just a couple years prior gotten internet on a home computer and discovered this new thing called internet, and there are other people remember. It's like these are wonderful websites. There was He-Man.org that I found, which I didn't first really find anything else in it, but was looking at maybe the toy sections and publishing sections, like looking that, oh, there's so many mini comics and they have little reviews about them, but something like the He-Man and She-Ra episode review website which was done by James Eatock and Zadok Angel. So they had like these one awesome, just every week they had a review on it, and we would get to like see images posted and text, and they had audio clips and even small video clips. So like all that like was already just soaking up all that information about the vintage material and how many episodes there even were of He-Man and She-Ra. And then there would be that Mattel was gonna do something like, and it came to be that they had a toy line coming made by the Four Horsemen. And after that initial announcement, they also had like, okay, we're gonna make a animation to go with these. So I was watching those episodes actually thanks to a fan who would record on a VHS tape and sending them to me, and I would just look at them when I got the VHS tape and watch it with a friend who had a better VCR that would understand better the speed that those current American tapes had. With the differences in the European VCRs and speeds are with American. So, and they had people discussing the episodes every week on the discussion forums. So I was just having a blast that there was like more He-Man content coming, and just every week we would get to see a new episode and talk about it, and then later it even went to Finland with a Finnish dub, and was in a good place at the right time to go and meet those people who were doing the Finnish dub. I got to meet the voice actors on most of the parts and the voice director, and even had an opportunity there to do one voice for the Finnish dub. Got to be Adam's grand Miro for the small line that he had in the episode Mechanic's Lament. So that even more sparked this like interest that 2002 series hit a different chord in me than obviously I already loved the Filmation series because that was the thing that was biggest in character building when I was a kid. But 2002 had a more concise story and more serialized, because there was the hindsight 2020 that they could take elements from the old materials and then reshape it into their own story. So all of that had a big impact on me, and then it took actually the 10-year anniversary of 2002 show. In 2012, I decided that, well, I'd like to make a blog for the cartoon. And I started looking up people who worked on the show and doing so. Talk with the voice of King Randor, Michael Donovan, who also did the voice directing, and like Gabe Kauth, who was Orko and Mechanic, and then director Gary Hartle, and just all these wonderful people, because by that point Facebook was more popular and people were joining it, and you could basically look up names of people who worked on your favorite cartoons and whatever, and maybe politely approach them in a and which I did. I didn't even think twice about it at the time. I just was somewhat naive but bold that, hey, I'm a fan from Finland. I'd like to talk with you about this old cartoon that you worked on. Like,
Yeah.
is it possible we could have a small interview? And it's been 10 years, but if you remember anything, then I'd surely appreciate it. And everyone always, they just were very gracious, and they would
Yeah.
all be just wonderful. Like story editor Dean Stefan, I had many talks with him just on Facebook Messenger, and had him on a podcast interview at the time, and just had all these questions and talks about you. And from like all that material gathering in those years, it helped basically form the basis that I was thinking in the very back of my mind that someday I'd like to maybe write a book about it. And that
Hmm.
was very much just by James Eatock, who had around 2010 his own unofficial for the filmation.
Okay.
Just all text book, like no official images or anything like that, but just a episode guide and some trivia and all those wonderful things. And so when I was working on the official books, there were a couple moments when we were like not what would be the next project. Like it, we were discovering like it as they moved from one project to another. That is the next one going to be, because they started with the art book, and then there was the mini comic,
Okay.
and later like a news strip book, and then they did, I think animated got there right before strip, and so there like what will be the next book. And there was some talk that could there be one to show, because it has a smaller episode count. So it's like if you make a book in that dark horse dimensions, then it's one of those that you would probably need to fill it up with maybe the comic info as well, and maybe a lot of images and all those things that the animated guide for He-Man and She-Ra had. But it's also a bit more niche on the grand scale of things, that even though people like the 2002 series, it's like it only lasted for a short while and has not made as much of an impact on the fandom that the Filmation one did. So
Okay.
it's very understandable that maybe it's not a high priority that there would be a book about it, because there are other topics as well that they could put all their resources into. I was personally also hoping at time maybe there could a comic, the London in issues, the UK
Okay.
comics. I mean,
Yeah.
those would make a wonderful series of books, because there's just so many issues that, I mean, you could have like 2 or even 3 volumes easily. But I think those plans also never really went anywhere, and I'm sure if they intended all that much. So, but when it became more apparent that, okay, 2002 is maybe not gonna get a book on its own. I mean, they did get the character location and all that info in the character guide. I did all the research on the 2002 cartoon and the 2002 comic, and also the modern DC comics.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the thing stage, rewrote a whole bunch of those aspects for it. And so I had interviews, I had some personal communications with the creators, I had like all these research lists and materials. So when it looked at, okay, maybe there won't be a official book, then I'll make a unofficial one,
Mm-hmm.
and see if anyone would be interested in it. So I went through all the possible documentaries that I could find. I poured over all the scripts and some storyboards that I had access to, and just pulled as much information as I could from just everywhere and put it in this one personal book of mine. And had a pre-order for it, and also the wonderful folk on the German website Planet Eternia had their
Mm-hmm.
own pre-order for it. So we
cool.
had a whole bunch of order it. So it went really well. It's been just great to hear people who have read it and just what they thought of it. And hopefully one day there could be an official one. You never
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm glad that in the absence of official things like this, I'm glad that there's people like you out there who are willing to fill in those gaps, because I think it's important, for these things to be documented in some aspect, whether it's through the fans or through an official capacity. So I'm glad you picked up that and decided to do that.
And that's one of those things that I discovered along the way, because uh, I mean, when you naturally might compare it to like fiction, and if someone would make about that, and where would you find all the research material, or are there people maybe still alive who can talk about it, or are there any storyboards still in existence? Maybe they've been lost time. And so in regard, I've also interviewed He-Man.org and Battle Ram blog website some vintage creators like Bob Null, who designed the original vintage Masters of the Universe logo and the packaging for it. And so it's talking with people, it's always one of those cases that, do they remember something that was like 30 years ago that they worked on, and maybe for some it was just the job, so they might remember all that much. So with the 2002 version, I mean, less time had passed, but it was still like, okay, it's been like at least some 15, almost 20 years now. So talking with people, it can still bring up those moments that, do they remember much of the work that they did on it. And because most images or information that was posted online back then, like 2001, 2002, 2003, much of that is gone. Like there are no websites where you can find like an interview with a creator from 2002 all that easily. There
Mm-hmm.
are things like Wayback Machine, which is quite the lifesaver on some of those cases. But even there, I mean, you can find a base website maybe for some comic or pop culture site that used to be, but then when you try and click the actual links inside it, then those have not been archived.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was a interesting thing to go when I was researching on the 2002 that basically you can never go wrong with printed material. So
Right. Right.
if I could find the old Toy Fair magazines, those had just an abundance of information.
Hmm.
So I'm very glad that some of those magazines are still available, maybe through eBay or other
Yeah.
fans. I had a whole bunch of friends and fans who helped out on those, acquiring the information and like scanned the interview pages for me so I could read them and like pull again more information for my texts. But it's the those early days on the internet, like it's quite difficult at times to find something very specific, and it's like it's gone. So on that note, I tried as much info that I could find into this book in a printed form, so maybe it'll survive a bit longer.
Well, that's awesome. I'm excited to be able to, you know, get it in hand so I can read through it, flip through it, and see all the work and love that you put into this. You know, you and I have been talking for I think a little bit over a year now since we, you know, kind of connected through some of the fan communities, and I'm always just really grateful for the knowledge that you have to share with people. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see, you know, your more focused work rather than just our conversations that we have, but the more focused work that you put to this series guide. So I do look forward to that. Um, Moving on from the work you've done, let's kind of talk in a more general sense about Masters of the Universe. Uh, Going back to the Filmation days, we you know, we both grew up on that show, and it was very influential in cementing our love for Masters of the Universe. In your opinion, what do you think makes that particular version so, I guess, so special to so many fans? Like, why is that the one that everybody refers back to the most?
I mean, I'm just a fan from Finland, and
Hmm.
if the Filmation show had been, let's say, just the average Saturday morning cartoon, like one episode per week, and maybe like a episode order of like episodes, or at best maybe 26 at the time that the networks had, and still I think even today they have those certain not episode counts that they have for shows, and it might not have reached Finland the way that it did, because the Finland is such a small place, and uh, sure we might have gotten the toys, but then would have missed out on the cartoon. But because I mean they had the wonderful idea to make it into a syndicated show with 5 episodes per week, and then getting to like have a 65 episodes in a season, then they could just have a whole lot of episodes for reruns and easier to sell even abroad. So you reached with the show a whole bunch of more kids growing up. And obviously
Hmm.
the storytelling is the main focus there. You have the
Sure.
good versus evil, which is always something that will appeal to kids. And Masters, there's a fantasy mixed with fiction, which I just always really loved. You have best of both worlds there, and the intertwined nature of it, that you can have a machine that maybe talks, but then it still seems with it still fits in a more fantasy act in with fantastical elements. So it's not a boring looking sci-fi, just a gray dull machine, but it has like those flourishes. And obviously it's a toy line first, and then they made all the comics and cartoons to support it, but it's still the story and the characters are at the center in Filmation case, because they had the awesome deal that they didn't have to put any toys on the show that they didn't want. So their writers were more able to just focus with a core set of 5 to 6 characters, and you follow those characters on the show. You don't get like Thunder Punch He-Man, like the geeky variants like show in every 5 episodes. And I mean, sure, for some kids it would have been awesome to see that, hey, the toy that I found at the store is now on the screen. But personally, I actually like it more that we never got to see those like variants, and it just He-Man in the same design from episode 1 to episode 130th. So there's consistency. As a kid, it helps also just to manage this world that you're growing into. But yeah, I think it's the actual characters that her and their relations that have survived all these years. You do remember a feisty Tila, and you remember the mentor Man-at-Arms, and the hero itself, Adam, who has a secret identity, and there are those archetypal things to it, but it's still they stand the test of time.
They're able to capture something special with what they did, and I think you're right. And it's this wonderful mix of the sci-fi and the fantasy, but it's also at its heart, it's a very humanistic story because of the characters that they're telling. Everybody can see Adam and the struggles that he has carrying this secret, and being perceived as someone who's cowardly, but he's actually so much more than that. I think people connect with those kind of story elements, and it's why we are able to relate to a character like that, especially as children, when we're trying to find ourselves and trying to figure out who we are and find our place. I think those kind of stories are important. You mentioned one thing you mentioned, and I think this is worth noting, is that Filmation had that deal in place to where they didn't have to include all the variations on the toys in the animation. And I think what we see a lot of is people kind of discard the Filmation series as just a 20-minute toy commercial, and I think that's really selling the cartoon short, because that's not what was going on at the time. And the joke is, if it is a toy commercial, then it's not a very good toy commercial because it's not showing any of the toys.
Yeah, it's to say that, well, the cartoons in the 80s after a certain point they were made to support already existing toys. So yeah, that base mentality is there, and in Filmation case, it still is a bit wrong to say it because of the specific nature that they had with Mattel. I mean, they put money into it themselves at the same time as Mattel to produce the episodes. Animation had like Group W, the Westinghouse, as the like bigger corporation that they were like in line with. So they were like making sure they do the best product they can, and it's not like that, oh, Mattel will just come in and say what. There's the like good moral base that Filmation had done with other shows, and they wanted to keep doing that with He-Man as well, that there's a moral to most, if all, the stories, that whatever kids will see, the story will also be a bit of an educational tool. So, and then too often you have even the moral at the very end where the character. But yeah, it's obviously Mattel wanted to make or have animation that would be in support of their toy line, and yeah, they might have wanted more variants or toys to show up, but in the end that didn't happen. So it has its own unique place when compared to maybe other shows at the time, Transformers, for example.
Right. Yeah. There's no, I think nostalgia also plays a big role in why there's such a lasting affection for the Filmation series. Obviously, we were kids when we watched it, and I think that's just how nostalgia is always going to work. We're always going to look back at those things that we enjoyed as children with fondness, and I think that's a powerful aspect of the Filmation Masters of the Universe TV series, is that it has that benefit. So moving on from Filmation, we have the New Adventures series that came about in the 90s, and personally, that's not necessarily anything I really look at with too much fondness. There's a little bit of fun to be had with the toys and things like that, but it's not, I guess it's not part of my general consensus of, Masters of the Universe. When I think about it, it's one of those aspects that I always have to be reminded of, that the New Adventures exists. But I think what most people are more aware of is the 2000 series that we've talked a little bit more about. And this was a full reboot of the franchise, of the property. It told the origin story more completely than it's ever really been told before, with Adam, becoming the champion and becoming He-Man and being given that responsibility by the sorceress. It had brand new character designs that were very evocative of the time period. I look at those, the way those figures and those characters are designed, and they definitely have that slightly anime feel to them, and a lot of big swords and hard edge angles on the muscles and and things like that. It's very, it's easily to tell what time period those come from in the early 2000s. But beyond all of that, it was a very good series, and it was fleshed out very well in terms of narrative. And I think that's why fans have responded to it so well, is that it's telling a good story, and it doesn't feel like individual episodes, but it feels like a running narrative that's happening. What are your thoughts on that series and what it does, what it gets right, and what it maybe doesn't do as well as the Filmation series?
At the time, when they were creating the show, they did reach out to James Eatock and Zadok Angel, who were doing their He-Man and episode review website,
Mm-hmm.
that if this sort of film guide or series Bible encyclopedia, if you will, for them. So they would look through that. It had like characters, locations, and all that information, probably the episode synopsis as well. So they could pick out materials from there, and well, they did introduce characters like Count Marzo or Evil
Mm-hmm.
Seed to the new version. Uh, the Filmation show, I think, has a little bit more family unit in a sense, if that makes sense. You feel more when you look at the episodes that how band Prince Adam has more banter with Tila,
Yeah.
or Man-at-Arms reacting to Orko's antics, or someone like the Sorceress being a very wise and even motherly figure to the characters who are trying to, well, learn about the world and life. Most Orko, also even just Adam, when he's trying to figure out all the He-Man stuff that he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that because they also had just so many episodes, then obviously it had more time to develop those relationships and the chemistries. In MYP, the reboot show by Mike Kim Productions, they have similar elements, brings more about maybe it's a team of warriors put together. You actually have Man-at-Arms be a quite the leader in most episodes. He commands the people, he makes the plans, he has like all these gadgets, prepare next attack that the guys will do, and He-Man every now and then just shows up to help for the big finale. But
Right.
I mean, in the episodes that they did make, I actually feel that He-Man is like a second to Man-at-Arms in that sort of group dynamic. When in Filmation, I would say whenever He-Man enters the picture, I mean he takes command. I mean everyone listens up to him, even Man-at-Arms. So there's a bit of a difference in that with the two shows, and they're both like nothing wrong with either approach. They are both ingrained in the approach or the aspects and the worlds that they have respectfully. So they both work for their own settings. So in the MYP, you also get the more serialized nature with the storytelling, that something that happened in episode 4 will be mentioned in episode 7, or even just back-to-back episodes. And Filmation, well, it was sort of designed to be more standalone episodes. They did have continuity there. I mean, it's also something that fans sometimes think that there isn't any, but yes, there is if you look for it. And they had certain writers like J. Michael Straczynski and Larry DiTilio, who were big fans of continuity, so they would make references to previous event, but they freelance writers, so, and with having just 65 episodes to make in a season and a whole bunch of story pitches going around, we've seen some of those unused story ideas actually in the Dark Horse book. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's those moments when it didn't all maybe line up as well, but that wasn't the point. So I mean, they could, networks had more ability to shuffle the episodes around in the scheduling back then.
You know, with that series in particular, I remember, and I think you and I have talked a little bit about this before, but I remember when it came out that it had a little bit of pushback. Maybe not even pushback. Maybe that's the wrong word. But there did seem to be a conversation going on about things that the 2002 series did in terms of certain aspects that people didn't like in the beginning. Things like, you know, people didn't like the design of the new Sword of Power, or, you know, Adam was considered to be too small, you know, in his physicality. When, you know, compared to He-Man, you know, in the Filmation show, it was obviously the same. He was the same size as He-Man, but in this show, he's much smaller, and depicted, you know, the transformation is much more noticeable, right? Uh, I just remember these were things that people were talking about, you know, in the fan communities, that they didn't like about the new series. But it seems that now, you know, looking back and with the benefit of retrospect, the series is generally looked upon favorably, you know, and in a positive light. Do you remember any of those conversations, you know, from the early days when this series first aired, that you want to talk about?
For me, it already came like with the when the toys were revealed San Diego Comic Con. They
Mm.
had these ups that the Four Horsemen had made, and at the Mattel booth they displayed like the first uh, 7 or 8 characters. I forget how many. So they had the, at the time, the more angular designs, and there was a bit of the McFarland toys
Yeah.
in spring, and the Four Horsemen. I mean, they did wonderful job with it, but I mean, it's the first proper reboot for that brand, so fans obviously they were more accustomed to the vintage line and how the characters maybe had the battle stance or the proportion. Yeah, I mean, the very first thing was the new design of the power sword. Fans did not like at all, and I think no matter how many things they have found to appreciate later about the 2002 line, the sword still is a topic of conversation. That it's it, it it is what it is. But I remember like the toys and how they had more lean, more sleek design. So I mean,
Hmm.
He-Man again got some criticism from a couple of fans that he's not looking as buff as he should be, and he has a weird large hunchback, and like so many nitpicky, and
So we
it's
definitely,
I because it was like one of those, yeah, It's I can certainly understand it from the fan perspective,
Sure.
which is why I'm actually very glad that when those Four Horsemen character designs were translated into the animation, they made the animation work with those designs, and sometimes the uh, actual characters on screen look to my eyes a bit better than the actual toys. And
Yeah.
nothing nothing against the Four Horsemen. I've talked with Eric Cornboy many times, and he's a wonderful guy and all that. But in case I didn't get 2002 toys themselves, I cherry picked some main characters that I liked. We did get them in Finland as well, so I didn't have to import everything from the States. But to me, the cartoon was the bigger impact there. That I like the style of it and the animation. Some of the color choices in the animation are not as vibrant as in Filmation, so they got a bit better with MYP, the season 2 episodes. And but yeah, fans had much to say about the redesigns, and with the cartoon, many watched the pilot episode, which is
Hmm.
the beginning, and the three episodes put to as one had a lot of the anime info, and was the infamous sword and weapon twirling that got a lot of fans talking. And it's
Hmm.
I think that even permeates even today, that that's one of the things that they remember from that show, that oh, they just all they did was like twirl their swords and all that. But it's like, if you go and watch them, then you will see that yeah, in the very beginning they have that as an element, but it gets lesser as more episodes are being made. So
Right.
it's not just all of the show just a whole bunch of sword twirling. And that's why even for my unofficial guide, I have a counted all the times that they actually did twirl their weapons. So
Nice.
you can find out how many times it happened in the book. Link is in the
Awesome.
description.
For sure. I think that's something that is going to happen with anytime, and anytime there's something new for the brand. I think fans are going to have opinions about that, based on what they've seen before, what their expectations are going into the new content. We obviously saw that with the new Revelation series. People had very strong opinions about certain character designs and how characters were portrayed. Uh, don't know if I really want to get into that, but you see it. You see the fans tend to push back against what they expect, and I think the benefit of being able to look back at something, I think it's always kinder to these things in that regard. That it's not as bad as we initially, as the conversation about it is. When we first see those designs, I think once we have some distance between the reveal and the actual product, I think things tend to balance out a little bit better.
Definitely. And I think one of the strengths that comes with all of it is just that um, currently it's a bit better I think then it was maybe in those 2002 times, because it's like you had like the one toy line, and you then had the cartoon and even the comic that was just all about that version.
Hmm.
Then when that ended, we got the classics, which
Yeah.
the toys were awesome. The uh, bios for the characters were a bit so,
Kind of hit and miss.
and then we got the, yeah, and but during like when the classics were coming out, they new comics done, and I think that was a good sort of not sure what a good word would be, but like a divider, that
Hmm.
you had maybe the story for the classics going on, and they did their own thing, trying to just mash up all these varying elements in together. And I mean, it doesn't work because He-Man just has had so many evolving canons like since day one.
Hmm.
But then when the DC Comics around 2012 came, you suddenly had at the same time existing different designs for characters and different stories that were happening, like still at the same time. So you had the ability to pick and choose that, okay, I don't like maybe those stories, but maybe these other stories are a bit better.
Sure.
And the culmination would be maybe currently that they had that Masters of the multiverse comic, where they embraced much of it. That,
Hmm.
hey, there are different stories, different canons, different iterations of, but they can still exist at the same time, and we can take a look at how do they work and how do they bounce off each other. And then the um, currently upcoming uh, Masters of the Universe, the Masterverse comics,
Hmm.
then again, you have all these new stories and new uh, different designs. So in on the toy shelves, if you find a Revelation He-Man that you like more than maybe the other Masterverse design of He-Man,
Hmm.
then you have that ability to just grab the figure that you
The one
like
you like.
more.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that's the thing that I always and that I prefer, that it's not just we're gonna do this now and it'll be like for the next 3 years or the next 7 years before we'll try anything different. It's like
Right.
live or die with this one concept. So yeah, so that's why I do like the current case pick and choose. I mean,
Yeah.
it maybe has its own drawbacks, but it's like, I think the Transformers, as an example, had uh, around the time when they did the first of their live action movies, that they could have on retail the uh, toys that were designed based on the movie look, but at the same time, Hasbro had maybe some like classic Generation 1 toys of Transformers. And that's
Hmm.
like, at the time, like 2007, I remember thinking that hopefully we'll get something that for He-Man, that you can have some new designs, but maybe you'll also get some designs that are meant for the older generation vintage fans.
Right.
So
Right.
that's something I like with what's going on currently, and
Mhm.
actually very excited for those Masterverse comics that I hear you got to read the first three. So
Yeah.
I wish you would tell about them, but we still
um,
need to wait for the
yeah,
first
gotta
issue
wait.
to come out. So
Yeah, but I think you're right. Like I mean, that's exactly where we're at currently with this. We've got, what is it, three? We have three different toy lines with, between Origins, Masterverse, and the CGI toys. But then we've also got the Mega Constructs, you know, building toys that people seem to enjoy. There's the two new cartoons with Revelation and soon to be Revolution, and and the CGI series. And so we're at this point where we do there's something for everybody. We can pick the version we like and enjoy it, and somebody else can pick the version they like and enjoy it. I do like the multiverse aspect of Master of the Universe. In fact, that comic book series that came out that Tim Seeley authored was one of my favorite newer stories. I liked how they incorporated all aspects of He-Man into that. I thought it was a lot of fun, and that is what these new Masterverse comics are doing as well. It's a multiverse uh, type of story. Uh, I can't say a lot about it, obviously, but even though I've read the first three issues, but the general consensus and the general setup, and you'll see Tim Seeley talk about this in the interview when I talked with him, is that it's basically the story setup is, the sorceress and Zodak are having a conversation about whether or not Adam He-Man should be allowed to continue to exist with the power that he has. Uh, the sorceress is arguing in his favor that he does need to exist and he is needed, and Zodak's arguing against it because it's an imbalance of cosmic power. And so the general idea is that the sorceress is showing Zodak these different versions of He-Man throughout the multiverse, and that's a fun story to me. Those kind of things are fun to look at, and it if you want it to be canon for your own head canon, that's great, but it doesn't have to be the only way that He-Man exists and the only way that you can enjoy He-Man. So I guess my point in
that
all of that is that I,
actually,
I, I agree with you.
and that idea actually reminds me of the earlier DC Comics, the prelude to Eternity War. I think it
Hmm.
was issue 19 of the then ongoing, where they have a very, very young his father from the wreckage, and basically starts time for sorceress to have a discussion with Zodak, and it's all
Hmm.
about like, should this one character have all this power in his possession, and what will he do with it, and should he
Right.
let to be like grow up, and so they have been laying work for some years now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we're at a point with Master of the Universe where I think we have more content than we ever have had before. Uh, it feels like it's a good time to be a fan, because we have so much access to all this new content, and so I agree with you with the mindset that embrace what you love about it, and that's okay. There's plenty for everybody, and there's something for everybody to enjoy about this brand.
And one thing is, I feel is great that whatever there is that will keep the brand evolving and keep it alive, because as long as there are just new iterations coming out and just new fans into the mix, and it also provides opportunities that some of the older vintage materials can be refreshed, or otherwise, like in the case of the German Blu-ray release for the He-Man and She-Ra. I mean, it's a my own light went away, but it's a the old episodes getting just HD treatment, and something like we didn't have even 10 years ago. So the technology evolved, or anything else that can be uncovered in this time, like it's a wonderful set that has just like all the He-Man and She-Ra episodes, and the 2 TV specials, and Christmas special as well, and like Secret of the Sword, and it's all upscaled to like 1080 quality, and you get to see like some aspects that the DVD versions just couldn't handle, because like on DVD you need to have compression for the episodes depending how many episodes you have per disc. So one thing is like with Blu-ray, the material, the data is uncompressed, so you can see more clearly just the animation on Battle Cat during transformation, for example.
Okay.
And it's like, so it looks just magnificent on a big screen. So and like that wasn't possible in a previous time, but because there's still interest and there's still the fan base, so, and there's new things coming there. There's the, like as you said, the Revolution series is coming to Netflix this year, I think, 2023, and then they are making the movie. So like as long as the brand is kept alive, I'm here for all of it, and excited to see where it goes next.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with all of that. You know, it's important to keep the brand alive, and the more we have of it, the better our chances are to continue the longevity of this brand. You know, so I think Yuka, I think that's basically all the questions that I have about this. I just, one final question for you. After so many years for you, your experience with Masters of the Universe, both as a fan and in your, professional capacity and an official capacity of things that you've worked on, what is it about Masters of the Universe that continues to inspire you and bring you back to this world of Eternia and its heroes?
It is the characters themselves and the stories that can be told with them. I've seen, for example, a whole bunch of wonderful fan written stories and even fan comics that people have made. They are always just inspired to make all these wonderful custom figures and dioramas, and in my case, whenever I'm like creating art, be it just drawing something or coloring or edit videos or writing, it's always in somewhere in the back of my mind, and it's the high adventure and the fantasy, the science, and just it always comes back to it. And I many times when I was learning, for example, digital coloring back in the day, I just look at different artworks of vintage covers on He-Man, or even at the time they had like comic covers and pin-ups and all that, and it all kept inspiring me to like try and do better with my own efforts, to get better with my own art and my own coloring, everything. And in some sense, well, the morals of the show obviously are something that would be good to keep in mind as you
Yes.
grow up in this world. It's not always the best applicable, but we do the best we can on this journey you are.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today and chatting about this stuff. Like I said before, I always enjoy talking with you about Masters of the Universe. I think your knowledge of the brand and its many facets is always something that I can learn from. And so I appreciate you being a part of this fandom, and I appreciate the work that you do to promote the fandom and to promote this brand that we both love. So thank you, and thanks for your time here. Before we
Glad to be here.
Good. Before we go, do you want to? I'll let you kind of plug your channels and social aspects of the things you do. Where can people find you?
Currently, I've been writing articles about He-Man for the Battle Ram blog website, which is just a site that I think anyone interested in the vintage toy line and those concepts should check out. It has a whole bunch of research from Adam McCombs, who's behind it all, and I'm the more recent addition to it. I've been the behind the scenes on some of it for some years now, always looking up for information and data and images, the best high resolution versions that there are, and some minor corrections here and there, but also writing articles for it on my own. There will be some Filmation topics, and also one recent article I actually did was Masters of the Taylorverse, which is Mark Taylor's because when he was creating the designs for the toys, he came up with some story ideas on his own. Those ideas were not really used in any of the mini comics that were written by different people or aspects going forward, but he had his own unique view on the characters and the story, which he has told in interviews and documentaries. And I wanted to just get it all in a one article since his passing. Well, actually, I think I did start the article before he passed away, but it was more recent published articles I did, and more will be coming on the site. I also have my own YouTube channel under the name Toon Jukka, where I have a series called Eternia Fact Files. It dives into some origins or other questions fans have had about He-Man and She-Ra all over the years, and it's I'm digging up all the original sources, like scripts or interviews or series Bibles and all that, so I can find the answers. And hopefully they will be educating for people. More videos coming in the upcoming month, so look forward on those as well.
Cool.
And I'm also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, so you can find me there. I think more on Facebook, possibly sometimes on Twitter. It's hard to keep up with so many different social
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, definitely. Well, awesome. And I will include, links to all these things that you've talked about, all these places in the description for the video here. So yeah, uh, people, those of you out there watching, definitely take a look at some of Yuka's materials and the work that he's done. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning, with the official Dark Horse books that he's worked on, with the mini comics collection and the character guide, uh, you won't be, you'll be satisfied with what those have to offer. So um,
You can
I
find those
guess,
on Amazon, and
yeah.
with the board games, they are licensed for Europe, so
Mhm.
there's that little snag. But I think both the Fields of Eternia and also Battleground have Battleground actually already has a retail, but Fields of Eternia started with a Kickstarter, and
Okay.
it'll also get a retail version. So
Awesome.
people will get those as well if they look for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for joining us today. You can find me on YouTube at this channel. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter, at Dad at Arms for Instagram, and for Twitter it's at Red Pyramid 9, or you can just look up Dad at Arms and I should pop up. So, and I mainly what I do on those avenues is I take photos of toys that I have, and that's kind of the bulk of it. And then for the YouTube channel, I do kind of long form interviews with people like Yuka and other creators and people are who you should be paying attention to in the Master Universe world. So it's a lot of fun. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Good journey.
Good journey.